In a world that feels like it's just overflowing with conflict, it's a tough question, right? How do you know when to speak up and when to just step back? Well, today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating classical Islamic framework for navigating exactly that, social and political turmoil. It's a concept scholars call fitna, and we're going to see what it can teach us about, making the right call in these really chaotic times. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the timeless dilemma itself. Then we'll look at why a simple ruling just doesn't cut it. After that, we'll get to the heart of it all, a 5-level framework. We'll also cover the essential ground rules you have to know. And finally, we'll wrap up with what this whole framework really teaches us.
All right, first up, the timeless dilemma of fitna. Let's really set the stage here and get a handle on the core problem we're talking about.
This is a question we all face, right? Conflict is everywhere. Misinformation is just rampant. And you feel this pressure, this immense pressure, to engage, to take a side, to say something. But is that always the right move? It turns out Islamic scholarship has been wrestling with this exact dilemma for, believe it or not, over 1,000 years. And listen to this quote. As for our time, fitnas have become like waves in the sea, in their abundance and enormity. Wow. That just perfectly describes that feeling of being completely overwhelmed, doesn't it? The problems are huge, they're constant, they just keep crashing over us one after another. And what's wild is that this isn't some new feeling, but man, does it feel relevant today. So it's easy to think the answer is just, black and white. Either jump in or stay out. But that's where things get interesting. Let's look at why it's about so much more than a simple ruling. A lot of this thinking actually goes way back to the earliest days of Islam. See, the early scholars based their views on these massive historical events like the conflict between Ali and Muawiyah. They looked really closely at how the Prophet's own companions handled that incredibly difficult time. And, well, they came away with different takeaways on what the right thing to do was. And this basically led to two main camps. On one side, you had the Hanafi school, who argued that pulling back from this kind of strife, seclusion, was actually obligatory, a duty. But then, the majority of other scholars saw it differently. They said it was recommended. A really good, wise thing to do, but not necessarily a requirement for everyone all the time. And that right there is the key. A single, one-size-fits-all rule just doesn't work, does it? Because every situation is different. The type of conflict matters. Your place in the community matters. And hey, even your own spiritual state matters. So what do you do with all that complexity? Well, that's what pushed later scholars to come up with a much more nuanced way to think about this. And that brings us to the main event. We're talking about a framework. The 5 levels of seclusion. Now, this isn't about giving you a simple answer. It's more like a flexible model designed to help you ask the right questions. Okay, so this image, it might look a little complicated at first glance, but what's so cool about it is that this is the framework in its original form. Think of it less like a rigid set of rules and more like a diagnostic tool. It's all about helping you figure out how serious the situation is so you can find the right response starting from the ground up. So here they are, the 5 levels. You've got seclusion of the tongue, then secluding from callers to strife, then factions of strife, then a more general seclusion in homes, and finally, all the way to secluding from people and places. See how it escalates? It goes from something internal, just controlling your speech, all the way to physically removing yourself. Let's break each one down. Okay, level 1. This is the foundation for everything else, and it starts with your tongue. As the saying goes, in times of fitna, the tongue is as dangerous as the sword. This is the absolute baseline. It means you stop the gossip, you stop spreading rumors, you stop making these quick, hot-take judgments on situations you don't fully understand. Because in these moments, a careless word can be just as destructive as a weapon. All right, level 2, secluding from the callers to fitna. This kicks in when the problem isn't just some vague tension in the air. No, this is when specific people or groups are actively fanning the flames. And the advice here is pretty direct. Cut them off. Stop listening to them, stop watching their videos, don't give them your attention or your platform. Now, level 3 is where things get way more serious. This is when society splinters into different factions, and there's no unified, legitimate leader to look to. It's total division. And the guidance? It's blunt. Withdraw from all the competing groups. Don't pick a side. One tradition even says to hold on to your principles, even if it means you have to bite onto the root of a tree to do it. Level 4 gets even darker. This is when general seclusion in your home is advised, and listen to the description for when this applies. It's for times where a man does not feel safe with his companion. Just think about that. The social fabric has ripped apart so badly that you can't even trust your friends, your neighbors. At that point, the advice is to stay home to protect yourself and your family.
And that brings us to the final, most extreme stage, level 5, secluding from people and places. This is the absolute last resort. It's for when things are so dangerous, so toxic, that the only way to protect your physical safety, and maybe even more importantly your faith, is to just leave. This is that classic image of taking your family and heading for the hills, completely removing yourself from it all.
Okay, so we've got this 5-level toolkit. But like any powerful tool, you have to know how to use it right. And that brings us to the essential ground rules. These are basically the 2 non-negotiables that you absolutely have to keep in mind.
First up, Golden Rule 1. Seclusion is never an excuse to ditch your fundamental religious duties. You don't just stop praying or being a good person. And Golden Rule 2 is maybe even more important. The pushback you get for doing good, for calling out injustice, for example, that is not the kind of fitna we're talking about. That doesn't justify seclusion. That's seen as a test, a challenge to be patient with, not something to run away from.
And this prophetic saying really drives that second rule home. The believer who mixes with people and is patient with their harm is greater in reward than the one who does not. It's saying that sticking it out, engaging for a good reason, and being patient with the hardship that comes with it, that's actually the better path. This whole seclusion framework, it's a safety measure, a concession for terrible times. It's not the ideal.
So let's pull all this together. What does this framework actually teach us? What's the big takeaway here?
The most important thing to see is that this isn't a rigid command. It's a flexible toolkit. We've gone from a simple should I or shouldn't I debate to a much smarter, more dynamic model. The goal isn't to give you a simple rule, it's to help you make a principled judgment call.
And what that means is, it's a personal responsibility. The framework puts the ball in your court. You have to really look at the situation, but you also have to look at yourself, your own knowledge, your own faith, your own limits, to figure out what the right course of action really is for you.
And that leaves us with a really big question to think about. In an age of digital conflict and online echo chambers, what does seclusion truly mean for you? You know, the callers to strife might just be a notification on your phone. The factions might be the online bubbles we live in. So what does it really mean to seclude your tongue when you have a keyboard at your fingertips? This ancient framework, it's not just history. It's a powerful way to think about how we live right now.